Few figures from the ancient world captured the imagination, quite like the Roman gladiator. These fighters, who lived and died for the entertainment of roaring crowds, have become enduring symbols of both the grandeur and the brutality of Roman civilization. Their story is one of slavery and fame, discipline and violence, spectacle and sacrifice. This story tells us as much about Roman society as it does about the men and women who fought in the arena. The roots of gladiatorial combat stretch back long before the height of the Roman Empire. Historians generally trace the tradition to Etruscan funeral rites, where armed combat was staged as a blood offering to honor the dead. The earliest recorded gladiatorial contest in Rome took place in 264 BC, when 3 pairs of gladiators fought at the funeral of Junius Brutus Pera, organized by his sons. These early bouts were modest affairs, but over the following centuries, the practice grew in scale and ambition until it became one of the defining features of Roman public life. By the late Republic, gladiatorial games had evolved far beyond their funerary origins. Ambitious politicians and military leaders discovered that sponsoring elaborate games was a powerful way to win popular favor. Julius Caesar famously staged games featuring hundreds of gladiators, and as the Republic gave way to the Empire, emperors embraced the spectacle as a tool of political control. The poet Juvenal would later summarize the dynamic with his famous phrase, bread and circuses, capturing the way rulers used food distributions and public entertainment to keep the population content. The popular image of the gladiator as an enslaved person, dragged unwillingly into the arena, is only part of the story. While it is true that many gladiators were prisoners of war, condemned criminals, or purchased enslaved people, a surprising number were free men who volunteered for the arena. Some were drawn by the promise of prize money and fame, while others were former soldiers seeking the thrill of combat. A small number were even members of the equestrian or senatorial classes. However, Roman law increasingly sought to restrict this practice, viewing it as beneath the dignity of the upper orders. Women also fought as gladiators on occasion, though this was far less common and often viewed as a novelty. Emperor Domitian reportedly staged bouts between female gladiators fighting by torchlight, and archaeological evidence from sites such as the Great Dover Street Burial in London suggests that female fighters were more than mere legend. Regardless of their origins, all gladiators who entered the professional system underwent rigorous training. They were housed in specialized schools called ludi, the most famous of which was the Ludus Magnus, located near the Colosseum in Rome. These schools were run by a lanista, an owner-trainer who invested heavily in his fighters and had a financial incentive to keep them alive and in peak condition. Gladiators received expert medical care, a carefully managed diet rich in barley and beans, and intensive daily training in combat techniques. One of the most fascinating aspects of gladiatorial combat was the variety of fighter types, each with distinctive weapons, armor, and fighting styles. Matches were carefully arranged to pit contrasting styles against each other, creating dramatic, unpredictable encounters. The murmillo was among the most recognizable types, armed with a short sword called a gladius, a large rectangular shield, a helmet with a distinctive fish-shaped crest, and armor on the sword arm and the left leg. The murmillo was often matched against the Thraex, or Thracian, who carried a curved sword known as a sica and a small square shield, and wore greaves on both legs and a helmet with a tall curved crest. The retiarius, or net fighter, was perhaps the most unusual gladiator type. Armed with a weighted net, a trident, and a small dagger, and wearing almost no armor, the retiarius relied on speed and agility rather than brute strength. His typical opponent was a heavily armored fighter whose smooth, rounded helmet was designed to resist the net's entanglement. Gladiatorial games were elaborate events that could last for days. A typical day of games began with animal hunts in the morning, followed by public executions at midday, and culminated in the gladiatorial bouts in the afternoon. The entire event was accompanied by music, commentary, and theatrical staging designed to heighten the drama. Before a bout, gladiators would parade into the arena in a ceremonial procession called the pompa. They might salute the game's sponsor or the emperor, though the famous phrase, "We who are about to die, salute you," appears only once in the historical record, and was likely not a standard greeting. Fighters then engaged in preliminary warm-ups with wooden weapons before the real combat began. Contrary to popular belief, most gladiatorial bouts did not end in death. Gladiators were expensive investments, and killing a skilled fighter could result in a significant financial loss for his owner. Studies of gladiatorial graveyards suggest that many fighters survived dozens of bouts over careers spanning years. When a gladiator was wounded or exhausted, he could appeal for mercy by raising a finger. The decision to spare or kill him then rested with the sponsor of the games, who was often influenced by the crowd's reaction. A thumb's gesture, the exact nature of which is still debated by scholars, would signal the fallen fighter's fate. Those gladiators who achieved consistent success could become genuine celebrities. Their names and images appeared on graffiti, pottery, and lamps across the Roman world. Fans followed their careers with passionate devotion, and victorious fighters received palm branches, laurel crowns, and substantial prize money. The ultimate reward was the rudis, a small wooden sword presented as a symbol of freedom from the obligation to fight. No discussion of gladiators is complete without mentioning the Flavian Amphitheatre, better known as the Colosseum. Completed under Emperor Titus, this colossal structure could hold an estimated 50,000 spectators and featured a complex system of underground tunnels, animal pens, and mechanical elevators that could deliver fighters and beasts directly into the arena through trapdoors in the floor. Its inauguration was marked by 100 days of continuous games. Yet the Colosseum was only the most famous of hundreds of amphitheatres spread across the Roman Empire. From the deserts of North Africa to the frontiers of Britain, nearly every significant Roman settlement had its own arena. These venues served not only as entertainment centres, but as powerful symbols of Roman identity and imperial authority, binding diverse populations together through shared cultural experience. Gladiatorial combat began to decline in the 4th and 5th centuries AD, influenced by the spread of Christianity, economic pressures, and changing cultural attitudes. Emperor Constantine issued restrictions on the games, and Emperor Honorius officially abolished gladiatorial combat, reportedly prompted by the martyrdom of a monk named Telemachus, who was killed by a crowd after attempting to stop a fight. Yet the gladiator's legacy endures. From the epic paintings of the 19th century to modern films, novels, and television series, the figure of the gladiator continues to fascinate. These warriors of the arena embody a paradox that remains compelling. They were simultaneously the lowest members of Roman society and its greatest celebrities, despised and adored in equal measure. Their story is ultimately a mirror reflecting the complexities of the civilization that created them, a civilization capable of extraordinary achievement and extraordinary cruelty, often in the same breath.